So if you don't want to be recorded for some reason, don't turn on your camera. But we are recording the videos and going to post them later onto our website. Just a reminder about the protocol for Zoom. We at the university now are supposed to actually log in through our Zoom account. And so when you've been in the waiting room today, I've gone ahead and admitted you, but technically I'm not actually supposed to do that. If I know you're from University of Maryland, you're supposed to actually log in. But then again, of course, guests I'm gonna always allow in as well. So just to be aware and make sure that you're doing that for other meetings now that it's all changed, and I found out I can't actually take that even off. So it's gonna have to stay that way. So it is, the only other announcement today is we do have a seminar next week as well. And that is a seminar from Bill Jones, who is going to be talking about phosphorus management. And he's going to be hosted by David Rupert. So without further ado, today's seminar is our very own Ed Landa. So Ed has been an affiliate faculty in the department now, I was counting it 7 years.
More like 12, I think.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had something that we'd voted. Maybe we voted to reinstitute it. That might be why. Okay. So more like 12 years. He was a friend of Dr. Bruce James, who was the physical chemist in our department. And I think that was your initial connection to the department.
Yes.
And I had the great pleasure of becoming friends with Ed even before I moved to Maryland, because he was the first person in ENST that sort of reached out as I was moving to Maryland to tell me that he has also had an Oregon connection. And turns out we've connected on many other things over the years. He was a scientist with the USGS out in Ruston for many years, 30?
36.
36, okay.
Yeah.
And then retired and has continued. He's taught honors courses in our department and been on a number of committees. And so it's a pleasure to have him with us today to speak. So Ed wants to start off today with a video, and we're having a little bit of technical issues here with the video playing through. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use some old-fashioned ingenuity here, and we're going to play it on another laptop that I have, and we're going to watch the video, and then Ed will begin his talk. So we'll do this. Bear with us. You got it started? Okay, start.
Start it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's not the right song. Just a second.
Oops.
Technical issue. Give us a second more.
Everyday people.
Yes, somehow, well, there's other ones in here. Problem.
All right, we'll try this again.
Great.
There we go. All right, without further ado, here's Ed Landa.
Well, thank you so much. That was great improvising. So you can see the title of my talk. The reason I wanted to play the video is because of the line in there, different strokes for different folks. I learned a lot about the song getting ready for this. Two interesting things. The phrase everybody attributes to Sly Stone, who wrote the song, but it actually came from Muhammad Ali, if you can believe it. And the other thing is this recording came out in 1968. And I think up until 2020, 1968 was probably the most traumatic year in the American experience that we know about. So I think it was a good choice to have it here. The very end of the video, I think it's kind of a wink that most people wouldn't get unless you researched it, but the astronauts who went to the moon took this song with them, And so that launch at the end that they show, I think, is kind of a cinematic nod to the astronauts and the link of this song to the space program. So again, what a year 2020 has been, just extraordinary for all of us, and we're still being bombarded every day. So this is not going to be uh, the typical science talk that I'm used to giving and used to hearing. Uh, my goal here is really to talk to the grad students and just tell you what my experience has been during COVID times as sort of an introduction, an entree to sharing within our whole community, either in the Q&A or any place in the future. Because, I mean, science is really storytelling. That's what we do in journal articles and reports. And this is just another form of storytelling. Again, I made this talk with no outline, little structure. That was intentional because I wanted to sort of capture where I am and where we all are in the moment. So for soil scientists especially, I think common ground is something that we all tend to find. And I put in uh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg here just with Scalia. These are two people, clearly different strokes, but they were able to find common ground on so many levels. So a little bit about our community. So the person I'm closest with, my office mate, my buddy, uh, Del Fanning. So Del and I share the end office down in what I call the monolith hallway. So we're always, anytime we're right next to the bullpen, so we share the microwave with the science grad students, and always like to see them and talk to them. Dell and I have lots of common ground because the mineral jarosite, this yellow mineral here, we've both worked on jarosite. So this is a paper by Dell, and Dell is looking at some acid sulfate soils there. I looked at jarosite from a different perspective because my work focused on mining waste, which I like to describe as soil-like material. It's the crushed rock left after uranium has been extracted from uranium ore, and it's disposed of in lagoons, and then it dries out and becomes penegenic material at that point. So radium, which is the key radionuclide in mill tailings from a health point of view, concentrates in the jarosite fraction. So that was the origin of my interest in how that mineral might dissolve in the environment. So Del and I have bonded on another thing. Del has taught me a lot, or an awful lot, about the monoliths, and one of them in particular from the Kenilworth dump in DC, which is, I think, one of our most striking ones, because at the very bottom of the profile, you see buried garbage. And there's a very sad story that goes with that, namely a 7-year-old boy, Kelvin Tyrone Mock, was killed in 1968. When he died in a fire. The dump was burning, and he died in the fire. It was just a horrible thing, and it resulted in the closure of the dump. Dell has told me stories about um, ash from the fires used to rain down in Berwyn Heights and College Park. So um, everyone was aware of the burning. So we're hoping to repurpose that monolith into an environmental justice focused mini exhibit within the monolith collection. So we've got a great team assembled of historians, artists. Um, we've got Jonathan, our multimedia guy, who's just terrific. And we've had the first time most of us came back to campus was to meet with Jonathan in the hallway, and we sort of scoped out what the issues were. So we're moving forward with that uh, project, and hope you'll all stay tuned on it. So another one of my colleagues is Marty. Marty helped me a lot in 2005 when I was still with USGS. I wrote a paper for the American Scientist about Albert Munsell, this distinguished looking guy here who we all, I think in soil science, used to assume Munsell was a soil scientist. I certainly did. And one day at a flea market, I stumbled across this book called A Color Notation by Munsell. And uh, then I did some research on him and found out, he was an artist, not a soil scientist, and quite a famous artist at that. And he developed this color scheme. So Munsell gets all the credit, but I want to give a shout out to Dorothy Nickerson, shown here, who received far less attention, but was a key player in developing the Munsell chart. So she got recognition later in life, but um, not too much during her active career with USDA. Okay, just one second. So another one of my colleagues is Barrett Wessel. So Barrett's now in Kentucky. He might be joining us, I'm not sure, but this is continuing the theme of common ground. So Dell, Marty, we have common ground. Barrett and I have common ground on, he's got an interest in environmental history, historical preservation. He actually did what I think was a remarkable cross training where he got certification in historic preservation through the School of Architecture. So that leads right into my next talk, which is cross training. I think cross training is something that is neglected, but I think um, COVID times, as this talk from Harvard shows, cross training comes in very valuable when some of these, you could see these first three MDs here are dermatologists. So I watched some of this video and basically they said, we're dermatologists, we're totally untrained to handle COVID, but if you had an MD after your name, that entire community was mobilized during the height of the pandemic. Um, so, and cross training was very valuable. Some of these people had been, they had their undergraduate degree in like systems engineering from MIT, things like that, and they were able to pull up that past knowledge. So I'm hoping in the future we'll have more dialogue on cross training, with Barrett being a pioneer in this within our cadre of grad students. So just a little bit about myself. So I went to the University of Minnesota. I got my master's and PhD in soil science. But I did my undergrad degree was in geology, and for my master's, which was on iron oxides, I did my minor in geology, and mostly geochemistry, environmental geology. But for my PhD, I had decided to work on radioactive waste, and I needed more training in that area. So I did a minor in the School of Public Health. And one day when I was actually pretty close to finishing my courses there, someone said to me, you know, if you take 2 more classes, you can get an MPH degree, Master of Public Health. So I went and talked to the guy who was on my committee and asked him about it. And he said, well, it's in the catalog. He says, I guess we can do it. So I took 2 additional classes. I spent a summer internship at Brookhaven National Lab, which was fantastic. And so I got my MPH the year before I got my PhD. So at Maryland, we now, fairly recently, but we have a School of Public Health at College Park. As a side note, there's also one at Baltimore, which seems to specialize mostly in epidemiology, but we've got public health talent in depth in the University of Maryland system. And I will just speak personally. For me, it's been great training. And in COVID times, I find myself reaching back in my memory bank and pulling up epidemiology stuff all the time. So it's another place I think people might just think about cross training. And I know we've got research connections with folks over in the School of Public Health, but maybe we could take more advantage of the teaching that they do. So a little bit about mentors, and again on myself. So I had the odd, but very, for me, very great uh, privilege to go to a junior high school where the principal was the author of this book. He was Samuel Namowitz. He was the original sole author. It was later, uh, he had a co-author later in life, but Namowitz was Mr. Earth Science for the entire US, and he was the principal at our school. And I think he just decided one day, I'm going to have earth science in my school. So he was not teaching at that point, but he drafted one of the teachers who happened to be my teacher and said, we're going to have an 8th grade earth science class. So we were given instructions to collect rocks all summer and bring them in the fall. And I spent the whole summer looking down, and I'm now 71, and I haven't stopped. I still spend my entire life looking down, which sometimes causes me to walk into parking meters and things, but I'm still looking down thanks to Namowitz. So I got my undergraduate degree in geology, and this guy here, Kurt Lowe, was my advisor. So in my junior year, which was the year actually of the moon launch, I uh, had read a paper by um, 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 Dr. Rich at VPI. It was on muscovite weathering, and it was published in Science. And I knew nothing about soil science at that point. He was a soil scientist. This was Charlie Rich. And I decided maybe I want to go to grad school on that. My original intent was to become an oceanographer, um, but I was captivated by this. So I lined up a summer job at the New York State College of Forestry in the Appalachian, I'm sorry, in the Adirondacks. Um, and I worked with a soil scientist with the great name of Albert Leaf. He was a forest soils guy, Albert Leaf. It still, I find it amazing. Yeah. So I had a great summer up there, and then I decided to go to grad school in soils. And Kurt Lowe told me, his exact words were, "You're crazy," and I left. I left my undergraduate career with those words echoing in my mind. I think Kurt was wrong, and I made the right choice. So this was my advisor, Bob Gast at University of Minnesota, and I did my master's degree on characterization of iron oxides, and then I did a complete switch. Bob had worked at Oak Ridge National Lab before coming to Minnesota, so he was well steeped in um, radioactive isotope work. So I did my research on technetium-99, which is a long-lived isotope, 2 times 10 to the 5th years. Uh, it was essentially unstudied at that point, and we were able to get a grant from what was then the Atomic Energy Commission. And the reason I stumbled upon technetium-99 was a booklet that the AEC had put out aimed at high school students, and for some reason they included a table with technetium-99. So I went and talked to Dr. Gast, and I said, do you know anything about this? No, I never heard of it. So we dug into it, and we wound up getting, I think, 5 years of funding. So it funded me and 2 other grad students after I left. So that was a great opportunity. And Bob went on to become, an, I think he retired as a VP of research at Michigan State. This is another one of people I regard as a mentor, Bill Back, who had the wonderful middle name, William Tecumseh Back. So Bill was clearly a mentor to many people. These 2 authors here, Mary Jo and Warren, were colleagues of mine at USGS in Reston. And Bill was sort of our godfather. You'd go to Bill for advice on everything. And Bill taught me this phrase, which I now want to pass on to all the grad students here: compare and contrast. When you think about it, that's what we do all the time. We compare our site and contrast it with other sites. And uh, some of you students will undoubtedly go to work for the federal government, and getting approval for foreign travel in the federal government is always a challenge, because the words like boondoggle and things like that come to the mind and the lips of administrators far too often. So Bill taught me the phrase: when you write up your justification, you always tell them that you have to go to fill in the blank country. For me, Russia, Japan, Kyrgyzstan, whatever. You go there to compare and contrast what we study in the US to the environmental situation there. It's uh, great words to live by. Thank you, Bill. So pandemic activities, what have we been doing? What have I been doing? What are you guys doing? Uh, One of the things I've discovered is new kinds of herbal tea. So here are two of my recommendations. The mango one is from Turkey and just superbly packaged and high quality. The Yogi brand I discovered on a trip to West Virginia last month, and it's fantastic. So I've been spending a lot of time during this period working with the Urban Soils Institute in New York City. So last October, I attended their symposium, which was split between Floyd Bennett Field, which is a historic airport in Queens. And then we also had a session on Governor's Island, which is a former Coast Guard base in New York Harbor. So the setting was spectacular. Uh, my hook to them is Margaret Boozer. So some of you know Margaret. Margaret is, I'd say, our unofficial ENST artist. She works right down the road in Mount Rainier. I met Margaret, we've calculated 16 years ago, when there was a newspaper article about her which described her as a, quote, soil-centric artist. So I go, I just got to meet her. So we had coffee and we've been great friends ever since. And Margaret uh, was involved with the Urban Soils Institute far earlier than I was. She's brought me into that circle, and I the people are just great to work with. So I'm truly enjoying it. So one of the things we're planning our new symposium. So we decided we needed a poster. Well, we really didn't. Uh, the poster ideas just came to me, and it was on a night when I looked at my notes getting ready for this. It was the night when the uh, just after the George Floyd killing, and my notes indicate that that was the night. So I started drafting out. I don't know why it just came to me, but um, so the Soil Science Society of America publishes these "I Love Soil" stickers, and they come in about 20 languages. They come on a roll. They're great if you're going overseas to visit a soils colleague. They're about the best gift you can bring. So I started with the idea of doing multiple languages of that, kind of like that picture I just showed before. But then um, I was watching CNN coverage of what's going on with COVID, and they had Maggie Haberman as a frequent guest. She's a New York Times reporter, and over her shoulder, like all these Zoom things, we're always looking at where people live. So over her shoulder, she's got this poster. It says, "I love New York more than ever." And it was designed by the guy who did the original "I love New York" symbol. He did it post 9/11. So a genius of a guy who sadly just died this year at age 91 or 2 or something. So working with fellow Igor up there at Urban Soils, together we put our heads together. He's a genius at computer graphics. So we came up with this one with the soil profile and the phrase. We substituted New York for soils. So I'm pretty happy with this, and I think we all are. And we're moving ahead with this symposium. The events will be in October, and I will get the word out to everybody. I hope it's a virtual symposium. symposium. I hope folks tune in. So another thing I've been involved in, both my wife and I are involved in this. When the COVID vaccine was proposed, they needed volunteers to participate. So both of us are in the oldest cohort, um, and um, so we both signed up. I was rejected on the first round in the phase 1 because of a pre-existing condition. So she went into this. This was the Pfizer drug test, and it's at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, which I had a vague familiarity with this area of right off Martin Luther King, but I now know this area like the back of my hand and can navigate alleyways, shortcuts through the ambulance loading areas, whatever, to get to the building. This is the picture here. You see the turret at the top. This is a spectacular Art Deco, the original building. But this campus is incredibly sprawling. And if you're not familiar with, I never realized what UMB meant, University of Maryland, Baltimore. It's a vast campus up there. It includes pharmacy, medicine, nursing, dentistry, public health, social work, and law. And maybe I missed something, but there, it just goes on for blocks and blocks. So we were in the Center for Vaccine Development, which is in 2 new buildings just down the street, West Baltimore, from this building here. So here's just to use the jargon of this field. So I'm now cross-training in vaccine guinea pig is my new specialty. So we are, both of us, Judith and I, we are, quote, arms in the study. In other words, that's the term for the people who get injected. So this is right outside that main building, this very nice vendor here who sells stuff from Senegal. So we had a nice conversation here. Um, this is a picture. I got my wife to come into the men's room because there's nobody around to show her this. This is in COVID times, every other sink can be used. So you can see they've got the sink cordoned off, one person at a time. So being arms in the study, you learn a lot about how it's nice when you're like an environmental science or soils investigator to see how medical investigators work. So it's like flipping the coin. When you're a guinea pig, you're looking at the other side of the coin. So this is the study I'm involved. She's in the Pfizer phase 1 trial, which was the one that determined if it's 1 or 2 shots, what the dosage, the optimal dosage was. So her pool of people was tiny, like within our age category in the Maryland trial, I think there were only 30 people. I'm in the phase 3 Moderna trial. So the Moderna trial is really scaled up tremendously in terms of numbers. So I keep hearing the number 30,000. I don't know if that's per center. I don't think so. I think that may be national scale. But when you go into this, you don't know if you're getting the placebo or the vaccine. I think in the phase 1, it was 1-to-1. I think in the phase 3, it's more like 4 will get it, 1 will get the placebo. But so here's the procedure. You go in. So when it was a different building, the Moderna people and the Pfizer people are in 2 different buildings. You go in the building, and I went up with one other guinea pig and a guy from the staff. So he took us up the freight elevator, and I thought, well, that must be the closest elevator. It turns out we went on the freight elevator because you can only put 2 people on the standard size elevator. So medical protocols are strictly followed here. So the first thing you do, you go into this room where you watch a video, and the tables are spaced. You sit 1 per table. There was only 2 of us. So you watch the video where basically the PI reads you word for word the consent form, which is a long, long consent form. But it's when you're listening to it, you don't just blow over it. You actually hear it. So you learn a lot from the consent form. Uh, and then you meet the PI. So there he is on the video, and there he is after he gave me a physical. So I passed the physical, and I moved into the next phase, which was you go into a waiting area. So uh, this here's the PI, two shots there. This other guy in the purple shirt. It turns out so he had a his briefcase had University of Maryland Medical School on it. So we were talking on the way up, and he's the vice president for research for the medical school, and he's being on the flip side of the coin. He's being a guinea pig in this study, which I thought was great. Clearly you can't have all UMD people. That would not be a representative trial, but I just lucked out on the day I was there to meet with him, which was nice. So here's the two steps. First, you get a blood draw, and uh, you get a blood draw and a COVID test. So this gentleman drew my blood and did the COVID test. So I had never had one before. So it's called a deep nasal swab. So he asked me, "Have you had this before?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, people describe it as being like having wasabi. So having one swallowed, freshly made horseradish at a factory in Baltimore. I mean, literally, it was just ground and served up. It's as potent as you ever find it. And you know the way it clears your sinuses. Well, the COVID test was not as strong as fresh horseradish, maybe old wasabi, but it was doable certainly. Uh, and here I am getting the blood draw. It was interesting when I asked them about a picture. They said we can take the picture, but we can't do it with the syringe in this frame because the syringe has details on it that would compromise the confidentiality, and it would also um, tell someone down the road whether you got the placebo or the vaccine. So obviously, I still don't know, and maybe they will tell us at the end. I'm not sure. So here's my wife in the Pfizer trial, getting a blood draw and getting ready for her work. So this vaccine center is fantastic. I'm hoping Paul is on the Zoom. I put this in for him to show the variety of studies, including malaria. So I'm hoping that um, once the COVID trial is a 2.5 year study period, so you cannot do any vaccinations, including um, the flu vaccine I'm able to take, but only after I get the second shot, which will be October 15th. So, but I would like to do some future trials with them, and specifically on malaria, which is an interest area of mine. So going to Baltimore, like I said, we've been to Baltimore as tourists, but we've never really honed in on the community. And the bottom line is both Judith and I just love Baltimore. And when you go up, like the day you have an injection, you're there for 4 hours, but the other checks, you're there for half an hour. And it takes us um, 45 minutes to drive up, 15 minutes to park. And we've decided, well, as long as we're up there, we're gonna enjoy the city. So we've explored many different neighborhoods, and we've actually gone up and stayed at Airbnb overnight so we can absorb more of Baltimore. So this is me. My head got cut off, so I've planted a new head on top. But this is me surreptitiously hopping on the security vehicle. So they have very cool security force there. They use segways and these cool three-way segway type things. So the first time we went up, you go into an elevated parking structure. It's vast, and literally when we came out, uh, we couldn't find our car because we didn't know which side we were on. It was totally disorienting here. So this gentleman came, and we weren't the first ones to have this dilemma, and he found our car for us. So Thank you, sir. And after that, we learned which elevator set to take and to take a picture of the, the elevator so we could find our car again. So some other stuff that's kind of related to what we do. This is um, a van that was parked in the ambulance area. So this acronym stands for Veterans Affairs Medical Healthcare System, and you can see they handle chemical, radiological incidents. I suspect that this is there in the event of a dirty bomb attack, that this would be a vehicle that would be mobilized. So it's on standby there. Just a little bit more about the campus. The law school is right on the way from the garage to the building where we would go for our shots. This is a shot from the parking structure, and in the background you can see Lexington Market, which has, by repute, I'm not an expert, but I think I agree with them, the best crab cakes in Baltimore. So I highly recommend it. And this is right out, this is that building. You can see that Senegalese vendor in the background. You see you can still do some soil science even on the medical complex. So like I said, Baltimore is an interest area. Before COVID, I had connected, it's a long story, so I won't go into it, but it's something called the Natural Dye Initiative, which is growing things like indigo, which is not typically grown in the Northeast, but for dyeing of wool and cotton, things like that. So I've taken classes on how to do dyeing. I really enjoy it, and I've connected with an urban farmer up there who grows indigo. So I've gotten interested in the whole issue of urban farming in Baltimore. So I've connected now with the nutrient management group, and I'd like to pursue that connection in the future and expanding to other farms. This is another urban farm which is run by Bon Secours hospital system. So here's some scenes. This is the indigo farm and an adjoining farm called Hidden Harvest Farm. So in the upper right corner is Rosa Chang, who's my friend and natural dye expert. She's an artist. She works for the Maryland Council of the Arts, and she has her own studio practice. And this was a day I went out and took some soil samples at the site. So talked to some of the local people, which was, it was fun to hear about their experience. They bring kids here to enjoy this green space. And again, for Paul, tires, we saw tires here. We saw a lot of tires in Baltimore. I'll show some more pictures in a minute. So this is the Bon Secours site, and I chatted with this gentleman on the tractor. He's a longtime employee here, and they're doing just a great job here on providing food security for people in this neighborhood. So Black Lives Matter, BLM. I grew up in the USGS, which is part of the Department of the Interior. The acronym BLM, for me, in the past has meant Bureau of Land Management, who's the steward of so much of the federal land in the West. But clearly BLM has taken on a whole new meaning for us. You see signs of it all over the city. The lower corner, this is another result of our exploration. This is right along Martin Luther King Drive, and we discovered this place that has just the most delicious fresh fried fish. Unfortunately, you can't sit inside. It's a carry out, and even if it was, you couldn't even use the counter in COVID times. So we found a place where someone has planted a chair out on a green strip, and so we've been there 3 times now, and the portions are so huge. We eat this fish for multiple days on all of our COVID days up there. So during this trip, one neighborhood we've explored is West Baltimore, and I'm a big fan of the HBO show The Wire. So The Wire started with they call The Corner, which is on Fayette. It's a neighborhood that's had a lot of problems with drug abuse and poverty, health disparities, other issues. But the mural gives me some hope that things will get better in the future here. Food security, food deserts, or if you drive through here, you just don't see real grocery stores. You just see corner markets, and the food selection is not good. I threw this picture in just because it's just found it just an amazing photo thing. I don't have that much to say about it, but it captures a moment during COVID times for me. So this day, we were actually going from the medical center to go visit Copen State, which is closed. This was during the summer, but I think they're on virtual learning also. Uh, this is their science building, very impressive. And I've looked at their website. They have people doing environmental science research. I think, as we work on diversity issues and interacting more with HBCUs, that Copen State might be a place we'll be looking in the future. So right on the way to Copen State, this was really freaky. We passed this tiny little sign, Emmanuel Tire, and this immediately brought back memories for me from about 25 years ago. One of the issues I've worked on is tire wear particles in the environment. In other words, the ground up abrasion particles that come off as you wear your tires down. So I needed some ground tire material. Tires are not like soil. They're very, very hard to grind. When you grind them, they just bounce back. They don't crush up except by methods like cryogenic grinding, which I didn't have any access to. So I found in the phone book, I guess, Emmanuel Tire. It was hard to navigate there. I think we used the EDC map books back then. I wound up on the wrong side of not tracks, but a park, I think. So I eventually found a manual tire. The guy was very nice. He gave me a 50-pound bag of ground tire material, which some of it still is in my office, believe it or not, because I'm hoping to get back to it. Paul and I actually used some in some mosquito studies. Um, so I remember the ground there was so spongy because the soil was basically admixed with tremendous amounts of rubber. So as you walked upon it, you would just bounce over the surface. And you can see the conveyor belt where they're still grinding up tires to this day. So you go down this road that I show here, just before you get to Emmanuel Tire, it says St. Peter's Cemetery. So we decided, let's go check. It looked like a very old cemetery. So we pulled in there and it was unbelievable. This is what you find. It's an ancient cemetery that's no longer having burials. It's the most peaceful place overlooking this highly industrialized site next door. So we explored this, talked to a guy here. There's people who live here. It's called Jonah House, and it was founded during the Vietnam War by protesters. So one of the gravestones here is Philip Berrigan, who's, if you Google him, you will see that Philip Berrigan was one of the major players in the anti-war movement. He was I think the group was called the Catonsville Five, and they were sent to jail for a variety of protests. So just fascinating. Here's some more neighborhoods that we explored and some of the things you see. So we went to West Virginia, and this is a soil scientist at West Virginia State University, which is the HBCU in West Virginia. So he showed me his work on acid mine drainage, and here's just some of the shots. You could see the iron coatings. You can see that iridescent slick which is typical of manganese oxidizing bacteria. And he's looking at rare earths, which is a major, major interest of mine. So this was a great visit. This is another, this is a treatment pond. And again, um, precipitating material coming from the acid mine drainage. So just the final shot. This is the faculty retreat that we had. It was great to see everyone together. And that basically is my COVID experience to date. So thank you.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. Really interesting talk. So I think there was maybe a couple questions. If you do have questions, you can type them into the chat or just turn on your camera. I think the camera is probably fine too. There was a question, and that was from Dave Tilley, and he wanted to know if you had learned about all the health benefits of turmeric. I think he was looking at your herbal tea shot there.
Well, it's a great question, and I have heard over the years about the health benefits of turmeric, but I've never really taken it into practice. But when I did the Zoom call, the retreat call, I was actually at the Hare Krishna compound in Moundsville, West Virginia, and so we were there for a week. We rented a cabin. It was my second time there. The last trip was just an overnight stay, and so we ate the diet that everyone in this campsite ate. And I can literally say that I don't like experiments to start with n=1. So I offer that caveat. But by the third day there, I felt better. I just felt great. And they used tremendous amounts of turmeric, cinnamon, cardamom. I don't know what it was, but I'm trying to fold turmeric into my diet and the whole grains and everything. So I am becoming a turmeric believer. Yes.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And then I guess I just would reflect and say that, it's interesting over the years, you and I have often talked about your adventures and all of the places that you've traveled. And I think it's awesome to see that you basically have been a tourist in your own backyard.
Sure. Sure.
And when West Virginia, and then I think that's really cool to have an opportunity. If there's a silver lining, it's to explore areas that we maybe overlook on the plane headed out, right? So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I highly recommend the neighborhood called Pigtown, which is as you're heading like away from the UMB campus before you get on 95. Pigtown is definitely worth exploring.
Cool. That's awesome. And so then I guess my last question is, so on the vaccine trial, so you go back in for your second, it's just one more shot. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. And then you're monitored for 2 years at a pretty infrequent basis. But like now I get a call once a week between shot 1 and 2. They call you. I've had no effects whatsoever. Neither has Judith. But so that's n=1 in Pfizer, n=1 in Moderna. So take it with a complete grain of salt. But
and are they testing antibodies? Is that one of the things they'll do?
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
So when we grow up, it's for when we go there now. It's only for a blood draw, and to check red in the initial week. They would check for redness on your arm. So for the Pfizer trial, Judith got this very elegant circle measuring device that you would measure the diameter of any redness. For my trial, they just said, here's a ruler, measure it. Yeah, but we do daily temperature checks for the first week, and you log in on your cell phone, enter your data, temperature, how do you feel, any swelling under your armpits, things like that. And so far, so good.
Fascinating. Really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, some of us have to head off. I think the faculty meeting here in a few minutes, and so I think we'll leave it there. But thank you again for a great talk. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.